Good morning. Welcome. My name is Michael Williamson. I am the president and CEO of First Bank, and I get to host this morning, and I'm so happy you're here with us. I thought we would kick off the morning with a quick video from our chairman, Mike Dearberg.
Family business is so much more than just business as usual. It takes an entirely different mindset, a different vision. You know a bright future is found in strong traditions. You see the freedom in looking further down the road. As part of the fourth generation of my family to help lead First Bank, I know we share your vision. That's why we've created the First Bank Center for Family-Owned Businesses to share our experience with monthly webinars, tailored products, tools, and education specific to family-owned businesses. Your vision is our vision. Let our experience be yours. Let's see what your future can be.
Well, what a great video from Mike, and I can tell you, he's just as a nice guy in person as he seems to be on the video. And I'm pleased that he's letting me host the event today for two reasons. Number one, it's just a great podcast and a great way to get across to our customers and the family-owned businesses that we represent. But number two is because we have Mark Sanborn. I will tell you, and I'm going to hold this up because I don't have the cover for it anymore, but I've got a Fred Factor book from years and years ago, and I used to teach to it as part of my leadership sessions, and actually still do use it in mentoring. And Mark, I went and found another one downstairs in one of the. As we just moved in, it was still in the box, so I had to go find it. I'm thrilled to introduce Mark, and I'm not going to say anything else because I want to hear what this guy has to say. Look forward to talking to you at the end of the day.
Well, thank you, Michael. Great to be with you. Welcome to the webinar. I think what the Center for Family-Owned Businesses does in providing ongoing education is terrific. In my work, I always say there's only two ways to grow your business. Number one, grow yourself. And number two, grow your team. Everything flows from that. I am a business person, entrepreneur. I have been involved in leadership, which I speak about a lot at the national level in two different organizations. And also I'm an investor, and both in startups and angel investing. And so I have a great interest in business at all levels, not just as an investor, but as someone who likes to get involved with helping small or family-owned businesses grow their success. I'm going to do a switch to the screen here and show you the slide deck. I hope. Host disabled participant screen sharing. All right, there we go. I'm guessing now it is enabled. Okay. There we are. Now, it would be great if I could ask you for a show of hands, how many of you have read the Fred Factor? But of course, on a Zoom call, that's a little harder to do. I've written 8 books. You may not know this, but all the proceeds from my books have gone to benefit children, mine. So Hunter and Jackson are very grateful for Michael not only buying my books, but teaching them in the past. But the 20th anniversary edition of the book is really already out. If you order it from Amazon, you won't get the new book. It's a weird quirk, but until Amazon sells the inventory of the old book, and they say it'll be another 6 to 8 weeks, they won't start shipping the new book. But Random House, Penguin Random House, has released this because the book was released in 2004. And one of the things that's been interesting is that the principles in the book haven't changed. You know, I believe truth is timeless. Principles and truth are true across time and culture and context. What changes is how you apply those principles. And when I did a re-edit of the book for the 20th anniversary edition, we only had to make 4 edits, and they were mostly technology related, a story about a cell phone and needing quarters or some silliness like that. But the question is, you know, what's the story? This is not a business parable, not a fable. It's a true story. I moved to Denver back in 1987. In 1988, I bought my first house, a home in an area of Denver called Washington Park. And I lived in my new old home. Oh, I was an old 1928 bungalow. I lived in my new home all of about 2 days when there was a knock on the front door. And I opened the front door. Standing there was a relatively short fellow wearing a blue-gray uniform and carrying a bag. He said, "Good morning, Mr. Sanborn. My name is Fred. I just stopped by to welcome you to the neighborhood, introduce myself, and find out a little bit about you and what you do for a living." Now, like all of you, I've been receiving mail all of my adult life, and I've never gotten a personal introduction to my postal carrier. So I said, "Fred, well, thanks for stopping by." I said, "I am a professional speaker. I do not have a real job." Fred said, "Well, if you're a speaker, you must travel a lot." And at the time, I was doing about 210, 220 days a year on the road. And I told him that. He said, "Great, if you'll just give me your calendar so that I know when you're in town. I'll hold your mail for you. I'll bundle it, and I'll only deliver it on the days that you're here to receive it." Now, I've never had a choice of a la carte mail service before either. I said, "Fred, that's probably not necessary. I have a box nailed here on the side of the house next to the front door. Just leave it in the box. I'll pick it up when I come back into town." Fred pointed out, he said, "Mr. Sanborn, burglars watch for mail in the box. That's one of the ways they know you're out of town. Here's what I'd recommend instead." He said, "I'll be glad to put mail in your box as long as the lid closes. That way nobody will know that you're gone. Any mail that doesn't fit in your box, I'll put in between the screen door and the front door. Nobody can see it there. And if that area becomes too full of mail, I'll hold the rest of your mail for you until you come back into town." Now, Fred is more worried about my mail than I am. But I want to make a really important point that isn't in the book. Fred is a professional, and a professional is someone who's more worried about the problem their product or service solves than you are, more worried about your success in that area of their expertise than you are. And that's why I always say that we all need to be professionals, because it creates what I call a no-brainer customer. I had an accountant for 23 years, and the only reason he is not my accountant today is he retired. He was so good at what he did. I never thought I should shop around. I never looked at alternatives. When I got an inquiry, I said, "I've already got an accountant I completely trust." Why? Because he was a professional. And I think today a lot of people make excuses that prevent them from being professionals. They say it's not my fault, not my problem, didn't cause it. I'm the leadership expert in residence at High Point University, where their mantra among all their staff, not just their professors, is, "It's not my problem, but it's up to me to provide a solution." That means if you're a food service worker and you have a question from a student, you don't go, "I don't know, ask somebody else." You find out the answer and you try to help them on the spot. So I agreed to Fred's system for delivering my mail, went out of town for a couple of weeks. And when I came back, I noticed my front doormat was missing. And I look around on my porch and I see my doormat's in the corner, but it's covering something. Here's what had happened. UPS had misdelivered a box of mine 5 doors down, left my box on somebody else's porch. Lucky for me, Fred the postman was on the job. Fred noticed it was my box on the wrong porch. So he picked up the box, carried it down, put it in the corner of my porch, wrote a personal note of explanation on it, then disguised it with a doormat so nobody would take it. See, not only is Fred delivering the mail, now he's picking up slack for UPS. I gotta be honest, I've been telling this story for years, and people often ask at this point, "Well, are you talking about the United States Postal Service? Or does Denver have their own?" Because we don't always associate the organization with the kind of extraordinary performance that Fred provided. And that's an important thing to remember. People who are really good at what they do are a great reflection on the organization. Organizations that aren't known for quality are a poor reflection on the people that work there. So if you get enough people to accept the responsibility to be Fred-like, you'll have an amazing reputation and brand in the marketplace. Let me just give you another quick aside. If you want to get more business, solve problems you didn't create, the opportunities that our competitors make when they screw something up are extraordinary. And it doesn't mean we take responsibility for the problem and why it was created, but like High Point University, we take responsibility for solving it. And that is one of the most effective ways I've ever encountered for stealing business from a competitor. Well, you know, that first Christmas, 1988, I was so impressed, grateful for Fred's extraordinary service. I left a little gift in the box for him. Now, the next day that mail got delivered, I had an unusual letter in my mail. See, the letter had a stamp on it, but the stamp wasn't canceled. And I see from the return address, the letter is from Fred Shea. That's his full name. Fred lives in Northland. I live in Denver. Fred knows it's a felony to put unposted mail in a box. So even though he carried the letter from his house to my house, he still put a stamp on just to keep it legal. So after I cut the stamp off, I read the letter. And the letter said, "Dear Mr. Sanborn, thank you for remembering me at Christmas. I'm flattered that you talk about me in your speeches and seminars and hope I can continue to provide excellent service." Now let's fast forward the tape. In 1997, I met my wife, Darla. 1995, if she's listening, she'll be like, "You forgot." 1995, I met and married my wife, Darla. She moved in for a couple of years, and then later we moved to Highlands Ranch, Colorado, where we live today. So for almost 10 years, Fred delivered my mail and then Darla's mail. But even if you had read the book, there are a couple things that you wouldn't know. And the first is this. When the book came out in 2004, Fred had been a postal carrier for 27 years and never been recognized by his employer. See, his customers knew he was great. His colleagues found him inspirational, but nobody in management seemed to notice, or if they noticed, they didn't recognize him. And this is such an important concept. And I remind everyone because it's so easy to miss it. If you want to have more Freds in your organization, your family business, pay attention to the ones you've already got. Over time, we tend to take good performance for granted. And we focus on people who aren't, who are underperforming, who are problems. And in effect, we feed our problems and starve our opportunities. Pay attention to the Freds you've already got if you want to have more Fred-like behavior. The second thing you wouldn't know from reading the book is that when I wrote it, I really didn't know what motivated Fred. See, as a person in leadership, I think it's important not just to know what people do, but why they do it. And so I asked Fred, I said, "Fred, what motivates you?" And at the end of the book, there's a chapter called The Spirit of Fred. And Fred talks about 5 or 6 things, but this is my favorite. Fred said, "You know, I lay in bed at the end of the day, I only worry about one thing." And that's pretty good because I worry about a lot of stuff. Fred said, "The only thing I worry about is, did I waste any of the day I just finished?" I think I could summarize all my books and 30 years of speaking in one sentence. Fear nothing but to waste the present moment. Because if you really take advantage of the moments become your life. If you can make an ordinary moment extraordinary, and not every moment, this isn't about being extraordinary 24/7. Nobody has the time or energy or ability to do that. It's about seizing an opportunity to make the most of each moment. And that's where I first met Fred, and we're still friends today. I spoke with he and his wife, Kathy, a few days ago. My wife and I try to periodically get together with them for dinner. He still lives in Northland. He's retired. He has 2 sons, he has 2 granddaughters, and Fred is the real deal. If you met him, you would find him unassuming. He doesn't like large groups, but one-on-one, he is an intensely relational human being. That was Fred Shea when the book came out in 2004, and that was Fred Shea a few summers ago when he and his wife had lunch with my wife and I. So what is the Fred factor? The Fred factor is the ability to continually create new value for those you live and work with through 3 things that you completely control: passion, creativity, and commitment. And just let me point out, the Fred Factor isn't just a workbook. I wrote it as a business philosophy, even though I think it's more often considered a customer service philosophy. I just believe that's the way we should do business. But I also believe, as I said earlier, you know, what's true at work is true at home. And we can use these same principles to enrich our personal relationships. And this is really the big message that underlies all my work, and that is nobody can prevent you from choosing to be extraordinary. I meet a lot of people that weren't taught to be extraordinary. Fred came from a family where he, by his own admission, says his parents were very self-absorbed and not interested in being of service to others. Fred told me once, he said, "You know, I became who I am today, not because of, but in spite of." And I think there are a lot of people that overcoming that lack of encouragement or the lack of training or the lack of awareness, when they do find out that they can make a difference, I believe they become very Fred-like. Nobody can prevent you from choosing to be extraordinary. That's a message for your kids. It's a message for your colleagues. It's a message for each of us. At the end of the day, to be extraordinary is a choice. I said it's the 20th anniversary edition of the book, and let me just tell you why. Not only do I think the book is still relevant, I think it's maybe even more relevant than when it came out in 2004. Today, a lot of people work 8 hours a day to make money so that they can make meaning in the evenings or on the weekends. They defer the meaning making. They've separated making money from making meaning. And I believe the best organizations allow you to do both. They let you know that what you do does matter and does make a difference, but they pay you fairly for that. And when you're a Fred, you don't look at what you do as redundant. You look for ways to be creative. And it gives you options. It gives you a choice, not just about the work you do. You may not have that choice, but it does give you a choice about how you do the work. So that's why the good news is I got lucky and I wrote a book that has withstood the test of time and continues to sell well enough that my publisher released the 20th anniversary edition. By the way, the first chapter of the book is a kind of a summary of some of the interesting things that have happened over 20 years. My favorite, which I cannot prove, unfortunately, I once had a friend call me and say that he had just been to the offices of the Limited in Columbus, Ohio, where Victoria's Secret is, and he claimed that they had a Fred Factor program going, and between each panel of lingerie models, they had a panel of Fred Factor principles. I want to believe it's true, but since I can't validate it with a photo, I will leave it to you whether or not that was the case. I like what Sun Tzu said. Sun Tzu is often quoted, but he actually was a proponent of the extraordinary. He says, use the ordinary to engage, but use the extraordinary to win. So today, in the time we've got left, we're going to talk about how you can become part of my Amway organization, because I really want to grow my downline and increase the amount of people I have on my team. No, I'm just messing with you. In the time we have left, I'm going to talk about 4.5 principles of the Fred Factor. 4 are in this book. There's another half principle that was in a sequel, and I'll include that as well. But the first principle of the Fred Factor is this: everyone makes a difference. Now, you're probably sitting there saying, well, I've heard that before. Probably you haven't. See, we grew up in a culture that tells people they can make a difference, not that they do make a difference. It's kind of like if you're not making a positive difference, you're not making any difference at all, and that simply isn't true. I believe everybody makes a difference. The only question is, what kind? Was it positive? Was it negative? Does it move the ball down the field for your family business, or do you take a loss? Neutrality is a myth at a practical level. And I've met people that say, you know, I'm keeping my nose clean, following the rules, I'm well behaved, I'm neutral. But let me ask you, when you meet somebody in the marketplace of human affairs, whether it's a grocery store or a gas station, who will not engage you, will not help you, do you think they're neutral or do you think they're indifferent? I think all neutrality is interpreted, right or wrong, as indifference. And indifference is probably the #1 killer of business today. So that means that the first job of leadership is to prove to others their significance, to show them that connection between what they do and how it impacts people. I want to say, if you get a complimentary note or feedback form or phone call from a customer, don't tell the employee that they wrote it about. Let the employee talk to the customer. Or if you have a customer who's upset about something that happened, bring them in to talk to a staff or a team meeting so that that same emotion about how what happened made that customer's life worse is truly understood. Good leaders show people that they do matter. And most people, by the way, don't know why they get out of bed in the morning. For years, I used to ask audiences, why do you get out of bed in the morning? I only ever got 3 responses, and I'm just being totally honest with you today at this First Bank webinar. Number 1, they say they have to. It's a vague sense of obligation. You've got to get up. Now, I don't mean to be, flip about it, but most people don't need to get up. If you lay there long enough, somebody would come and check up on you. Eventually, your spouse would miss you at breakfast. Maybe you're single, you say, well, I'll say that they miss you at work. You say, Mark, they don't like me at work. Well, here's the point. The government has a position for people who check up on people who don't get out of bed. I'm pretty sure. So the number one reason, not a compelling reason, I have to. Number 2, I'm just, again, being honest, people say because I have to go to the bathroom. Now, does this explain a lot about your team? Why'd you come into work today? I got up about 6 to go to the bathroom, figured as long as I was up, might as well go on into work. The truth is more people are motivated by their bladders than by their beliefs. And the third, and I only got this once from an engineer. It was a female engineer in Seattle, Washington. I said, why do you get out of bed in the morning? And she said, and this is my favorite response, because I stopped sleeping. That should explain a lot if you know any engineers. You know why an engineer goes to bed at night? Because they stop being awake. But here's what I want you to think about. You remember this company? They're still around. Now, you more recently know about them as the force behind the whole Harry Potter series. But they've been around over 100 years. And if you're anywhere near my age, you can remember in elementary school getting a 4-color catalog. And cheap ink came off on your fingers, but you got to pick books that you wanted to order. And you picked 23 and your parents let you buy 2. And they gave you money in an envelope. This is really how it worked. And you carried the envelope to school, and the teacher put all the envelopes into a bigger envelope and then went to Mexico and got really wasted. No, that was just my teacher. But no, what they did is they mailed that big envelope of money to Scholastic Books. And here's the thing, it took so long for the money to get there and the books to get back that you forgot. And one day you came in from recess and you looked down on your desk and there were your books. Wow, I mean, I can still remember this, and I'm 65 years old. Here's the thing about Scholastic Books. The president of the company, recently deceased, the president a few years ago, was in a warehouse and he saw a forklift driver. And he said to the forklift driver, he said, what is your job here? Now, at one level, that's kind of a dumb question because obviously the guy drives a forklift. But I loved his response. He says, sir, it is my job to help children learn to love reading. See, your work and your job are 2 different things. Your job is driving a forklift, but your work, that's the vision, that's the point and the purpose. At Scholastic, people know it's about helping children learn to love reading. And if you misplace a pallet of boxes or you damage a book, it diminishes the enthusiasm of the student for reading. See, that's the difference between being a hero and a zero. Whenever somebody says, I did what I was supposed to do, but the problem wasn't solved, you knew that they took action. But a hero, on the other hand, takes responsibility. Action is an input, responsibility creates an output, a solved problem, a happier customer, an enriched situation. And be very careful of any employee that says, I did what I was told, or who says they were following the rules, because that's usually an excuse for taking action, but not taking responsibility. The second principle, the Fred factor, it's all built on relationships. You see, if you're a leader, I always like to point out that leadership and management are not interchangeable. Managers have power over people, but leaders get results with or without a title. That's why my second book was called You Don't Need a Title to Be a Leader. Leaders have power with people. And what gives you power with people is the relationship you have with them. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about relationship building, but let me point something out. I don't know. I know there's a diversity of businesses. There's supposedly 118 of you here live today, but you might be in a business where you have very quick interactions with your customers. It's not like a financial services firm where you can build a deep long-term relationship. So I'm often asked, is there anything between an interaction and a relationship? And the answer is yes, there is. It's called a connection. A connection is a moment of shared affinity. It's when you notice that the person who you're taking care of that day is wearing a sweatshirt with your favorite football team, and you go, hey, you're a Broncos fan? So am I. By the way, that doesn't happen as much as it used to, but still, it could. And what happens is if you make enough connections with people, you create a relationship. And the research has actually been done. How many interactions or how many connections does it take to make a relationship? And that is about 5. About 5 moments of shared affinity that you start to feel you have a relationship with that provider. In the book, I talk about everything being built on relationship. And I'm going to very quickly give you the 7 keys because most people are not taught how to build relationships. But ask yourself, do you ever say to your employees, I want you to build better relationships? Never ask people to do what they haven't been taught to do. My friend, Dr. Nito Cubain says, expectation without education equals frustration. See, we ought to be training people. And even though we kind of learn by trial and error how to build relationship, there's an intentional way to do it. And the first is by being real. Being yourself, but being your best self. Millennials and digitals and what comes next. Younger people it's important to them that people are authentic. They don't want fake. They don't want posers. They don't want people pretending to be whom they're not. However, being real doesn't give you a license to just be an idiot, because we all have a higher and a lower nature. That's why I say be yourself, but be your best self. Be interested in the other person. We've all been on a phone where we could tell we didn't have the other person's attention. They were working on their computer or multitasking. I wish I had said this, but my friend John Maxwell said it, so I'll quote him. He said, when you value people, you add value to people. And that's how you add value to people. You really are interested in them and what they need, not you and your needs. Be knowledgeable. I had a Navy tech once save me $2,000. I won't get into the details, but I was doing a sound check backstage. My computer wasn't working, and I thought it was time to buy a new computer. At the time, it would have cost me about $2,000. And the tech said, before you do that, go buy this connector. And it was a $15 connector that worked, and my computer I was able to use for another few years. See, when you add your expertise or your knowledge to people, they value that. They know that you're committed to them. Excuse me. Be empathic. Cognitive empathy doesn't mean you feel the same way as another person. It means you understand how they feel. And empathy doesn't mean, hey, you're angry, so I'm angry. It just means I understand why you're angry. And it creates bridges. Be honest. Tell the truth. If you know it can be done by Friday for sure, don't say maybe Thursday. Say say Monday for sure, but it'll be done Friday, maybe, knowing that it will be done for sure on Monday. See, you're managing expectations. And when I say be honest, I mean factor in the reality that it's hard to make commitments with unknowns involved. I'm not talking about lying. I'm just saying don't make promises that you can't keep. Be helpful. I love it when you ask someone for directions and they go, well, you know what? Let me just walk you there. You're in a hospital, you can't find the office where your appointment is. A good staffer will say, you know what? I've got time. Let me just walk you to that office. And finally, be prompt, because the only thing the average customer today has less of than disposable income is disposable time and attention. Everything is built on relationships. The third principle, I got to admit, is one of my favorites: continually add value for others. Now, you probably didn't come on this or any other webinars because you had made so much money you wanted to throw it all away. Now, here's the key to successful business: outthink rather than outspend your competition. Replace money with imagination. Replace capital with creativity. And here's the thing that I've learned: little things make a big difference. We went to a restaurant years ago when our kids were young, On the Border. They're still around, but they no longer have kids eat free on Monday nights. But my boys and I went one night when my wife wasn't feeling well, and when we ordered her food to go, the wait person wrote on the styrofoam box, "Hope you're feeling better." See, a red ink pen and a little imagination was proof of thoughtfulness, and it created value. Or this one, I was staying at the Omni in the Gaslamp District, San Diego. Didn't have collar stays back when collars were long. So I go to the bell cap about 10 at night. I say, "Sir, where may I buy collar stays?" He said, "Dude, you can't." I said, "Why?" He said, "Only bars and restaurants open." I said, "Wow, what am I going to do?" He said, "Don't worry, I'll hook you up." And he goes to the front desk and he gets a plastic key card that's used in every hotel in America now, and a pair of scissors, and makes me collar stays. Now, if you're taking notes today, remember this: sameness sucks. People don't remember same. They remember different. That is value. There are some people that are saying just be different. I don't buy that. It's got to be a different that is valued, just as the wait person at On the Border or the bell cap at the Omni did. There's other little things. For instance, Milwaukee. I've flown all over the world. I've got somewhere between 3 and 4 million miles. Normally, when you gate check a bag, they bring the bags up at the end of the walkway, and everybody scrambles to find their bag, pull up the handle, and get out of the way. In Milwaukee, first and only time I've ever seen it. The person bringing up the bags took half a second to pull the handle up, and you would be amazed at how much more convenient and smoother that process went. My favorite urban bar in South Denver, White Chocolate Grill. If you order a cocktail, a martini or a Manhattan, they serve it in a chilled glass. And then about halfway through your drink, they bring another chilled glass and transfer it so that the liquid stays cold. Again, just a little thing, but no other restaurants that I've ever encountered do that. Or how about this one? Oh, is that the puppuccino? Yeah, my screen is messed up. If you're a dog, we're dog people. We have little tiny yappy dogs. They're 5 and 10 pounds each. But if you take them to Starbucks and you ask for a puppuccino, they will give you a little cup full of whipped cream, which of course your dog loves. Now, I found out the people who sponsor that are vets who then treat the dog for diabetes later. But no, I mean, little things make a big difference. And last but not least, if you want to add value, what irritates and annoys your customers? You can add value by removing it. In a hotel room, don't you hate it when you step into the tub and the stopper's down? I'd rather reach into a vat of thermonuclear waste than touch a tub stopper in a public bathtub. And you know there's no reason for it to be down? I've worked with many hotel chains and I've asked them, is there a reason? There is no official reason. There is a suspicion that some housekeepers think by putting it down, it suggests that the tub was cleaned. What I would suggest is don't put the tub stopper down. If you got feedback that says that's annoying, and I've shared that feedback at the front desk, make sure that as policy, every tub stopper in every room in your hotel is pulled up. You can add value to everything you do. It doesn't have to cost a nickel. And here's the killer app. It's free. And for 2024 and beyond, make sure you use it. It's called thoughtfulness. It means slowing down enough to spot the opportunities to add a little more value, not necessarily spending money, but maybe spending a little time or a little energy to create more value for your customers. And here's the one technique I want you to go back after the webinar and share with everybody. It's called the one-a-day principle. You can't delight every customer every day, but you can delight at least one customer a day. Do a great job for everybody. But the one-a-day principle says find one customer, maybe it's a vendor. Each day you can do something extraordinary for us so that night at dinner, they'll say, you'll never guess what happened to me today. And if you got 10 employees, that's 10 extraordinary acts a day. You got 100, that's 100. And that will put you in the hall of customer experience fame. Because you see, the tragedy isn't that we don't delight every customer. It's that we often go weeks or months without delighting any customers. 3.5 is work together. Now, this is fairly obvious, but I'm not suggesting this is all done through individual effort. It's done through a concerted effort by a team, because the only thing better than a committed individual is a team of committed individuals. Now, just for fun, see if you can identify who that guy is. I often in live seminars will say, I'll give anybody a free book who can name that person, and I've only ever given away one book. You probably don't recognize him, but you'll recognize his famous brother. That's Walt Disney, his brother Roy. And Roy was the CFO of Disney. He actually was the guy that built Disney World. See, Walt Disney found the land in Orlando, but he passed, and it was his brother that built Disney World. And the reason I bring him up is because for your organization, if you're a leader, it's not about rules, regulations, policies, and procedures. Now, a lot of that is required by law. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the quote from Roy Disney, who said, when values are clear, decision-making is easy. When people know what matters, what values you hold as an organization, that's what guides their behavior, not the rule book or the regulations. Now, I'm really proud of our oldest son, Hunter. He's 26. That's in Kingsville, Texas. He is a first lieutenant, United States Marine Corps, and that is a T-45 Goshawk, because he is going to be winged and flying the F-35, probably starting in July this summer. But the reason I put his picture up there, we're proud of both our boys, is because to become an officer in the Marines, you have to go through officer candidate school. And it's a very intense several-week process. It challenges your mind, your body, your spirit. And after Hunter had graduated, we were in the backyard with some friends talking about his experience. One of my friends said, Hunter, what's the most important thing you've learned at officer training school? And Hunter didn't pause. He said, that's easy. I learned that I would die for the man or woman next to me on the battlefield. And there was a long pause, because even though I knew my son and knew a lot about the training, I hadn't thought about it that way. My friend who asked had a 16-year-old son, and he's taken back. He said, I'm not sure I like that lesson. And Hunter said, no, that's only because you don't understand the implication. You see, in the Marines, if I would die for the man or woman next to me on the battlefield, that man or woman would die for me. Folks, it's hard for me to even talk about that without getting a little emotional. The good news is we're not in businesses, unless you're a first responder, perhaps, we're not in businesses that require a commitment of our life. But what makes teamwork work is when you are so committed to the success of the people on your team and they are so committed to you that you cannot fail. That it creates the kind of security and the kind of well-being that makes teams just truly extraordinary. How do you create a team of Freds? I'm going to give you an acronym. I know acronyms are sometimes corny, but they're a good way to remember things. After the webinar, first, find the people on your team who are Freds and find the people you want to hire who have Fred-like abilities. I always say in my work on culture building, don't just hire for skill, hire for fit. Don't hire somebody who's skilled but has a bad attitude, will be a team slayer instead of a team player. So find the Freds you've already got, make sure you reward and recognize them, which is the second part, because behavior that is not rewarded eventually ceases. When I say reward and recognize, reward is tangible. Maybe it's a bonus or 2 tickets to a play or a Starbucks gift card. But recognition is free. It just means making time to say thank you. You did a good job, and then explain why. Do what I said earlier. Use the principles of the Fred factor to teach people not just the principles, but the application, what they can do, whether it's the 1-a-day principle or something else I've talked about today, what they can do to be Fred-like. But the most important one of all, unequivocally, is to demonstrate it. I'm asked, can you make somebody be a Fred? I don't know. I couldn't make my boys take out the garbage when they lived at home. But I do know this, you can role model it and you can make it so that other people want to be that way. Don't preach, don't teach the Fred factor unless you yourself are truly committed to those principles. And last but not least, you got to reinvent yourself every day. You see, we all wake up in the morning and we have a choice. And the choice is, do we replicate or innovate? Do we do business the way we've always done it, or do we switch it up? Do we keep it fresh? Do we make it exciting? I think the worst sin of an ineffective leader is that they're boring and that they bore others. Now, there are a lot of things that leaders can do wrong, but extraordinary leaders are always excited about their work, and that excitement is contagious. Because for me, what it boils down to is what I call the 3 loves. The 3 loves are what make you a Fred. The first of the 3 loves I was reminded of by Lindsay Owen Jones, who was, for many years, the CEO of L'Oreal, one of the biggest, most successful cosmetics companies in the world. And he was asked by Forbes magazine, what is the secret of L'Oreal's success? Now, as a business person, you're probably amused because there are a lot of things. There's not like a absolutely singular only one, but there are some principles that are pretty important. And I think Lindsay Owen Jones nailed it when he said, if there's a reason why we are successful, it's because we love this business a little bit more than our competition. I think that's what gets you through difficult times. And you know, when you do retire or you sell your family business, you know, your greatest reflections are going to be on the challenges you face, not just the successes you achieved. We enjoy success, but we learn far more from challenges and difficulties. So the first of the 3 loves is love what you do. The second is love who you do it with. You may not agree with them. You might not have the same point of view, but if you are as committed to the success of the customer and others on your team, that makes you a team player. You can overcome a lot when there is that mutual commitment. And see, I think love is practical. Love is in clothes when you treat people with dignity and respect. And finally, last but not least, and you probably can see this coming, the third love is you don't only love what you do and who you do it with, you love who you do it for. The people who have voted with their time and their money, they've come to you to get the solution to their problem, to get the product they need to make their life a little bit better, a little bit more successful, a little bit happier. Because you see, when you love what you do, and you love who you do it for, and you love who you do it with, then you're really a Fred. You can follow me, by the way, on LinkedIn or Twitter, or those are the 2 primary outlets, but hashtag be extraordinary. And I do hope, as a way to extend the value, and we're going to do some Q&A shortly, but I hope as a way to extend some value to the time we've spent today, You will follow me on LinkedIn because I write on a regular basis, release information for leaders and how to be extraordinary there. So at this point, Michael, I believe I'm going to try to unshare my screen if I can. Uh-oh. Oh, there I am. I thought I had signed off, but I guess I'm still here.
Well, I'm glad you're still there. Can you hear me?
Whew, I can.
Wonderful. Well, I'm going to ask them to turn my video back on because I can't from my computer. But guys, I will say this. Please use the chat. I think we've got a wonderful opportunity here to ask questions. And since no one has asked anything in the chat yet, Mark, I'm going to start. I get to ask the first one. I think a lot of times I've witnessed leaders working on themselves to be a Fred. And I think you did say this earlier. Don't expect to be for your team to be a Fred if you're not willing to take that journey with them. Can the leader take his team on the journey with himself or herself and say, "Look, I'm gonna take this journey to being a Fred." Do they need to get there first, or do they need to take the team with them?
No, I think you can parallel process. I think it ultimately begins with a commitment. And I think that the commitment the leader makes, either personally and then later to his or her team, or personally and to the team at the same time, that says, we want to play by a higher standard. You may not have to, there may not be any requirement by law. You may be dominant in your marketplace. By the way, I have another book called The Intention Imperative, and I say better always beats best. No matter how good you are, there's somebody out there who's trying to be a little bit better. So being the best at what you do is a very tenuous situation to be in. But when you do try to create a team of Freds, you make it an interactive activity. One of the easiest ways to do that is at a staff meeting or whatever you call the group huddle you have on a periodic basis. Ask two things. Ask people, what was the most extraordinary thing that happened to you since our last meeting? I've done that, and it's kind of discouraging, but once I had a group of people, and the only thing they could come up with, a woman literally said, well, yesterday at the grocery store, the clerk smiled at me. Wow, that's sad, but it also means that there's a low bar, that it doesn't take a whole lot to exceed expectations, because regrettably, expectations in many market spaces are very low. The second thing is to share ideas about what everybody on the team has done. If I've done something, I'll give you an example. I worked with a pizza company. They were trying to increase market share. I said, one easy way to do that is have every delivery driver carry a bag of candy. Now, this was before Uber Eats and the alternatives. This is back when they hired drivers to deliver the pizza. I said, every home that has a small kid, the kid will come to the door when mom or dad get the pizza. And you ask the mom or dad, is it okay if I give Junior a piece of candy? And if they agree and you give that kid a piece of candy, you will become the dominant pizza supplier in that household for as long as they have kids in the household. McDonald's pioneered this years ago with Happy Meals and the little toys that made kids initially want to eat there. Little things make a big difference. If you're a dog person, if somebody does something nice for your dog, like Starbucks does, that matters. And what I go back to, Michael, what I said earlier, if you're moving 100 miles an hour with your hair on fire, you don't have time to think about this stuff. You got to make time. You don't have time. It doesn't automatically pop up on your calendar. You got to make time to engineer how to add value, how to build better relationships, how to make a bigger difference, and of course, how to stay motivated, which, by the way, most leaders, and I work with a lot of them, they neither have an agenda for their ongoing development. I believe every year you ought to pick two topics, one you need to know, the other you want to know more about. For me, last year, it was artificial intelligence. I did not become an expert, but I use artificial intelligence a lot now. And then you should always pick a topic that you simply want to know more about. Peter Drucker, the great father of modern management, was one of the leading Japanese art experts in the world. He used the same rigor and discipline to learn about Japanese art, which he enjoyed, as he did to become a pioneer in management studies.
That's a wonderful answer. And I think we've got one or two that have popped up on the chat. And by the way, people are already downloading your book on Audible, just so you know.
Oh, good.
But
By the way, that's my
Jennifer,
voice. I narrate. I narrate that Audible. Not all my books that I get to narrate, but I do narrate the Fred Factor.
oh, that's awesome. Jennifer Dennon asks, why do you think companies struggle with this so much?
Um, two, well, two or three things, and I don't have quantitative data, but my observation is number one, it's a lack of awareness. You know, you've got a certain number of dials or gauges on your dashboard, and I'm a pilot, not like my son is a pilot, but one of the things that will crash an airplane is when a pilot becomes task saturated. It's called task saturation. You become so focused on just one dial, maybe that's revenue or margin, fill in the blank, that you forget to notice the other dials, which indicate you're headed towards the ground. And so you gotta scan all the dials on your dashboard. But for many companies, they don't have a philosophy. This really, as I said, I really wanted to write a philosophy book for business. Philosophy literally means love of wisdom, and it also answers the question, how should we live? Business philosophy answers the question, how should we do business? So the first key is awareness. The second key is education. I meet a lot of people that would like to have more fun at work and build better relationships, add value, but they really don't know where to begin. And the third thing I think is just time. One of the interesting questions I'm often asked, usually by somebody that's a bit of a cynic, they go, well, you know, Fred must have worked an extra 2 hours a day. Fred didn't work any extra time. He didn't work longer. He worked differently. You see, it all fits in when you imbue this, or you infuse this, if you will, into the way that you're already working. I say, you know, don't get a different job until you do your job differently. Don't work longer. Longer just means you're probably not innovating because, you know, capacity, which I think, and I don't want to digress too much because I know we don't have several hours today, but when you increase capacity as a leader, you get more done in the same amount of time. People often think increasing capacity means working longer to get better results. No, if you work longer, you haven't increased your capacity. Capacity is when you can get more done in the same amount of time. And that's why I said at the very beginning, the only two ways to grow your business is to grow yourself and your team. That's what increases capacity. By the way, Michael, there was a question early on. What was the second reason? I'm not sure what part of I have a bunch of kind of a linear thinker. So what was that about?
I think that was right before you presented the second reason. But I'll ask
Oh,
that
okay.
if Jeffrey is
Yeah.
is still light on that, because Ed and I were texting back and forth in the background, going, "Well, I don't think he's got to it yet." Well, hold on, and then there it was. So if that's still a question out there, please type
I'll
it in
just
again.
recap. You know,
Yeah,
the four original principles. Number one, everybody makes a difference. Number two, it's all built on a relationship. Number three is you can add value to anything you do. It doesn't have to necessarily cost a nickel. And number four is you've got to reinvent yourself regularly. Now, I threw in that half principle. There is a sequel called Fred 2.0 that came out some years ago. And in that book, I do talk about using teamwork and the Fred Factor principles. But so you know, I threw in kind of an extra half principle today. But those are the four. And by the way, you can download the original. Read and download the original story, the first chapter of Fred, if you go to fredfactor.com. And there's also some other resources, including we offer individual training and licensing. But if you ever want to share that story of Fred, just go to fredfactor.com.
and we did get clarification. It was the second reason to get out of bed.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Well, again, this was an informal study. Number one is I have to. Number two, because I have to go to the bathroom. I mean, people were just being honest and go, well, I wake up at such time because I got to go to the bathroom. And then number three was that woman who I to this day love, who just says she quit sleeping. So
I'm going to go back and just and give the chance for one more question to be asked, and then give you an opportunity to wrap up. But I will tell you, when you were talking about the gauges on the plane just a second ago, and why aren't companies good at this? Speaking from someone who has worked inside very large companies and now someone that works for a family-owned business, I really think that the perspective is also different. Um, when you're working for those big companies, if there is an immediate return, if there's not an immediate movement on one of those dials in front of you, they don't want to have time for it. It's when you can get aligned with a group of people that think that they want a legacy, they want a longer term, and those companies tend to focus on the behaviors of how to get there. And it's just wonderful to be able to have that balance in a company.
Well,
You got
yeah,
to
I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
That's it's funny when I work with small businesses, family-owned businesses. They point out that large organizations have more resources, but when I work with large organizations, they point out that they don't have the flexibility to provide the kind of familiar and personal service that the smaller family-owned businesses have. So it's funny, we none of us have the complete deck of cards. You've got to be. I visited 40 years ago. I was in Japan and visited Mitsubishi, $150 billion company. Uh, and Mitsubishi at 150 billion is today only the 39th largest company in the world. So they have some resources, but if you understand anything about their company, all Japanese companies have a very deep philosophy. And one of the tenets of almost every Japanese company is the play for the long run. They don't plan for 12 months, 18 months. They plan for, literally 25, 50, 100 years. And so I'm not saying that that's the panacea for all businesses, but we have to balance short-term and long-term thinking. And an ineffective leader can pull the levers and bump any metric temporarily. It's the ability to move a metric permanently that matters. And what most people forget is the data that we analyze on spreadsheets and balance sheets, those are lagging indicators. They're the result of all the leading indicators, which are really what I hope came across today. These are the things to do to become the kind of company that you want to be. And I have another program where I talk about the 6 questions you have to ask to be a leader that lasts, because we've all seen leaders that went up like a firework and then exploded and came tumbling back to earth. So it's not just the ability to lead, it's to be a leader that lasts. And that's challenging. It's hard to do.
Well, I agree with some of the comments about the stellar presentation this morning, and I will leave it to you to say, is there any final message, anything that you want to leave us with today? Because I'm blown away and reinvigorated to go out and find some Freds in our organization today.
Yeah, let me just give you a couple easy to-dos. You jot them down if you want. But number one is when the webinar is over, either walk over to somebody's office or pick up the phone or send a text and just tell them you appreciate them and tell them why. I think appreciation is far more effective when people understand why, not just a generic "I appreciate you because you're a carbon-based life form." So that's easy to do. Just to do that like right now. And then the second thing would be to go, if you took notes, go through your notes and pick the 2 or 3 best ideas. You can implement all this stuff over time. But what are you going to start working on now? And maybe what's the one idea that you could instantly share with your team? Say, hey, I just got off the webinar. For me, I would recommend the 1-a-day principle because it's so easy and it's kind of a game. Just look for that one person. You got all day to do it, to do something a little extraordinary for. The third thing is the philosophy that, and I didn't share the slide with it today, is I call it the ABCD technique: above and beyond the call of duty. Do what you've always done, but ask, is there's something you can do to go above and beyond the call of duty. I had a few years ago bought a new pickup truck, and in Colorado you can register your vehicle online and by phone. And so I called into the DMV, which beats standing in the line for 6 hours, and I was doing it by phone. And the guy said, "Well, what's your VIN number?" Now I didn't have my title with me. My office at the time was on the 2nd floor. My truck was in the parking lot. It would have meant me putting them on hold, running down the stairs, running out the parking lot, getting my registration, running back up. And I go, "Oh," and I told him that. I said, "Oh, doggone it." I said, "I'm unprepared. My truck's in the parking lot." He goes, "I'm going to fill in a fake VIN. It doesn't matter because when you get the paperwork, it'll ask you to check that the VIN is correct. Just put the right VIN in then." Now, we all know people that would have said, if you don't have your VIN number, I can't help you. Call back later. But this guy went above and beyond the call of duty. It was a perfectly fine fix. Nobody suffered any loss. He just said, this is just to put in the paperwork and you can correct it later. And I always thought, wow, isn't that refreshing to find somebody that thinks that way, what I call ABCD. So, those are three things that I could suggest that you do right now. And, I guess I'll close, Michael, with what I wrote. My brother is a restaurant guy here in Colorado. He's also a restaurant broker. He took a different course. It's funny, his business is Sanborn and Company, and I'm Sanborn and Associates. So about once a month, I get called to appraise a restaurant, and about once a month, he gets called to give a speech. But when he graduated from high school, and this is advice I would give to anyone graduating from high school, I said, whatever you end up doing, do it better than anybody else, and you'll be successful. And I think that's our challenge. And I think if you're the leader of a family-owned business, you've already found what is important and what you like to do, and just look for an aspect of that you can do better than anybody else, and you will continue to be successful. Thank you for having me. My website's marksanborn.com. My direct email is mark@marksanborn.com if you have a question I didn't answer.
Wonderful. And thank you so much. I absolutely love today. And thank you for everyone who attended. We appreciate you. Please go to our website and you will see this video plus many more. We should have this one uploaded in the next few days. So thank you again. And Mark, great job. Thank you, sir.
My pleasure. All the best.